Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is Ian. Thank you for tuning in. Today, we're going to review some of the key elements of effective listening activities. Researchers traditionally break down listening activities into three stages: pre listening, while listening, and post listening. Let's start with pre listening. When considering pre listening, lots of scholars like to contrast between a bottom up approach and a top down approach. In the bottom up approach, it is very common to teach vocabulary words or to review grammar points so that way students are ready to anticipate the words that they will hear and they will be able to make better meaning out of what they are listening to. However, some scholars disagree with the practice of pre teaching vocabulary. In fact, some of them say that it's been largely discontinued. For example, a researcher named John Field points out that in real life, learners cannot expect unknown words to be explained in advance, which makes a lot of sense in real life communicative situations. It's even true for listening tests such as the Korean SAT. The Korean SAT will not pre-teach the words that they will use. The students have to be ready to use listening strategies in real time. As a result, some researchers are stronger proponents of the top-down approach. In the top-down approach, the goals are to set the context of the activity or to motivate the students to get their minds in the right place before they have to listen. As Field points out, in authentic listening contexts, learners have to learn to cope with situations where part of what is heard will not be familiar. And it brings up some interesting insight into the listening process of non native listeners. Quite frankly, even for native speakers, someone will never identify every single word that one is saying. More likely than not, you will identify a few key words, make inferences based on the context of those words, and finally, check those inferences against what comes next. I would like to explain this through a story. One day I was in the cafeteria and one of my coworkers turned to me and said, "Oh, Ian, 몇 년, blah, 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 Korean." Unfortunately, I did not listen to the rest of that question. I could not make out the words, but I found two key words, 몇 and 년. So, based on the context, I live in Korea, and it's very common for Korean people to ask me my age. I had thought that the man was asking me, "Oh, how old are you?" To which I replied, 30세, 30살이에요. Everybody laughed because that was actually not what he was asking. He was asking me how long I lived in Korea. But it shows the fact that for non-native listeners of a language, there's never 100% comprehension. It's rare. For the most part, we, even as native listeners, are listening for keywords, understanding those keywords in a given context, and then checking our assumptions based on what follows in the interaction. So, in a top down approach for pre listening, it is important to set the context. For example, who is speaking in this listening text? What is the topic? And what is the situation that is going on? And finally, you can create some motivation by allowing students to submit their own opinions or be able to relate the topic to the learner's own lives. When you can do that, it gets the students a lot more engaged before they listen, and I think they're more likely to focus on the listening activity. Let's listen to this brief example. This is a clip I found from a show in Canada called Kim's Convenience. As you listen to it, consider what pre-listening questions you could ask to students.
Been washing them.
Oh, just
Customer.
I told you no more customer using washroom. Too much cleaning.
I can't tell them no. It's a basic human right. When you have to go, you have to go.
Fine, I tell them.
We really appreciate you letting us use the washroom. Do you have something to say to the nice people?
Thank you.
Do you have something to say to nicer people?
Yes. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. I get mop. Little boy is a pea sprinkler.
Yeah, so what if you get some pee on the floor?
One time I find the pea on the ceiling. How you do that?
Maybe a light go up, he get scared, confused, doesn't matter. Washroom is a basic human right. Everyone needs a washroom.
Hey, where's your can?
Out of order. Try next door.
Okay, well, here are 3 different pre-listening questions that I might ask to students in order to set the context and to elicit their prior knowledge. You own a shop. Would you allow customers to use the toilet if they didn't buy anything? Why or why not?
I told you no more customer using washroom. Too much cleaning.
They can think, pair, share this. How many English words can you think of for toilet? Toilet, restroom, washroom, the facilities, the can, the loo, the John, the shitter, anyways, that's quite a few. I think that most people could think of about 4 or 5 at least. And finally, what are some examples of basic human rights?
Washroom is a basic human right. Everyone needs a washroom.
The biggest key for a pre-listening section of a listening activity is to keep it short. At most, it should only be about 5 minutes long. So after you've set the context or tried to receive students' own opinions, it's time to get into the task, the while listening task. It's oftentimes very common to provide comprehension questions or something to fill in the blank when doing a while listening task, but I think we can be more creative than that. For example, you could give students a map, and while listening to a given text, perhaps for directions, they could have to label buildings or draw a line to show the path that the person took. Or you could show 3 film trailers and have students select the movie poster that matches the film trailer that they listened to. You could have students draw symbols on a weather map by listening to an English weather report. Or finally, you could have students fill out a hotel registration form by listening to a customer's request for a room. The best part about these kinds of tasks is that they model the type of response that might be given to a listening experience in real life. And it provides a more reliable way of checking understanding. This is also from John Field. When considering a listening text to provide your students, oftentimes researchers recommend authentic materials whenever possible. Why? Well, students find it motivating to discover that they can extract information from an ungraded passage. I personally feel the exact same way whenever I listen to Korean songs. Every time I can distinguish a word or a phrase or make sense of the meaning of a given song lyric, it makes me feel very proud and very, very motivated. The same thing whenever I read Korean webcomics. If I can read a speech bubble and completely understand what the person is trying to say, I feel very, very empowered and very interested in what I am doing. So after 1 or 2 listenings and going over the answers of the while listening task, oftentimes it can benefit to use some post-listening activity as well. This is the time when you can talk about new vocabulary words or new grammatical phrases and things like that. Not necessarily before, but after is a really good time to explore these concepts. Some ideas of what you can do post-listening is you can use functional language. You can talk about things that are outside the scope of mere grammar or vocabulary. Things like politeness. So, for example,
Hey, where's your can?
Out of order.
is clearly not seen as a very polite sentence, as you can see from his rejection. So maybe you can ask students to make a role play. A customer asks a shop owner to use the toilet. Try to be polite. You can also use the listening text in order to make inferences about the given vocabulary. For example,
Hey, where's your can?
clearly this man is not talking about a can. This is the can, man. And finally, one thing about Kim's Convenience that I find a very interesting opportunity is that students can listen to actors speaking with a non-native form of English grammar. So they could listen to the speaker's sentence and then write it in more formal standard grammar. This would allow them to start to differentiate some of the differences between written English and spoken English. For example, try to imitate this sentence, but with more formal, standardized grammar.
I told you no more customer using washroom, too much cleaning. I told you no more customer using washroom, too much cleaning. I told you no more customer using washroom, too much cleaning.
So, in conclusion, most listening activities will often consist of 3 separate stages: pre-listening, while listening, and post-listening. And trying to keep everything short and efficient can go a long way to maximizing the amount of time that your students can actually listen to and engage with the listening text. Thank you so much for listening today, and I look forward to seeing you in class next time. Until then, cheers.